Can France's aviation capital reinvent itself? Hello, everyone. I'm François Picard. Welcome to the France 24 debate. Before coronavirus, Toulouse was soaring, churning out planes at a rate of 2 a day. The biggest challenge for that southwestern French city, home to the worldwide headquarters for European manufacturer Airbus, was, well, finding enough qualified labor to hire. Now, well, talk about a crash landing. The orders stopped overnight, with airlines the planet over struggling to stay afloat. It's not just Airbus, it's hundreds of Toulouse area subcontractors who work for the entire aerospace sector, including for US rival Boeing. So, after a stimulus plan for tourism and automobiles, enter the French government, unveiling this Tuesday a 15 billion euro plan for the aeronautics sector. It includes orders for military aircraft, freeze on loan repayments, and 1.5 billion euros earmarked for research so that the carbon neutral plane of tomorrow can be ready for takeoff by the year 2035. That would be 15 years sooner than first planned. We'll be asking about the plan and about the Toulouse area, a region where 40% of the jobs depend directly or indirectly on one single industry. Too dependent, the way Detroit was too dependent on car manufacturing. If the current pandemic is simply a patch of turbulence, Toulouse should be fine in the long run. But if coronavirus forces a serious rethink of humanity's overuse of air travel, well then, what's the plan? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the fortunes of Toulouse, and joining us is France 24's Toulouse correspondent, Chris Bachman. How are you?
Good to see you, Francois. Good to see you indeed.
All right, well, thanks for being with us. We want to welcome the recently re-elected mayor of the Toulouse suburb of L'Union, Marc Perret. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Marc Ivaldi is a professor of economics at the Toulouse School of Economics. We'll be asking you how this southwestern French city will fare in the brave new world that we face. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
She's a former Airbus employee who decided to reinvent herself. Penny Dickinson is the founder of Toulouse Walking Tours, which you say just celebrated its 10th year?
That's correct. Good afternoon, Francois. Thanks for inviting me to be on the show.
Thank you for joining us. I noticed on your Instagram account, there is a picture taken a few days ago at the L'Envol des Pionniers, the Air and Space Museum. It kind of reminds you just how much of Toulouse is intertwined with, well, the history of aviation, you might even say.
Exactly. I mean, the history and development of Toulouse, the city, and the history and development of the aerospace, the aviation industry are inextricably linked. And it's, if we think back 100 years, you know, Aéropostale, Pierre-Georges Laticouet, the founders, the pioneers of this industry, they were starting out with their own challenges, how to safely fly. And if we think, first of all, with the post and then with passengers, fast forward now to 2020, and we're facing, in a way, similar challenges. How can the aviation industry safely start carrying passengers and encouraging passengers to want to travel? And for Toulouse, that's both business travelers and leisure travelers.
Yeah, and again, at the heart of all of this. So that brings us to the topic at hand, of course, which is what the government announced. The finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, who spelled out some of those incentives that have been put out by the government, aids, loans, and again, this big target date of 2035.
Je le redis, le fil rouge de la relance française sera la décarbonation de l'économie. Ça a été vrai pour l'industrie automobile, c'est vrai pour l'industrie aéronautique et ce sera vrai pour tous les secteurs d'activité. Nous nous fixons donc un objectif très concret et très ambitieux. Parvenir à un avion neutre en carbone en 2035 au lieu de 2050.
Chris Bachman, what else did the minister say?
Yeah, basically, He's saying that if he doesn't do anything, 100,000 jobs, not just in Toulouse, but in the Bordeaux area as well, because they're very big. Dassau's there, the military's there, the drones are there. But he says if the government does nothing, 100,000 jobs would disappear. And I know when you speak to the mayor, Marc Perret, he has something to say about that as well, because he lobbies on behalf of the industry. But basically, he said that we have to invest in the long term, making sure that we have aircraft that people want, which means ones which are greener, because legislation will catch up with the aviation industry anyway and make them do greener aircraft. And he also wants to save all those suppliers. You know, the 26,000 people who work for Airbus in Toulouse alone, but it's about 90 if you include all the suppliers, you include the space industry, if you include the people who make the fuel that go into the rockets to launch those satellites. And those are the ones that also have to be protected. And so a lot of this money is going into making sure that they're protected, that they can actually ride out the storm, because the government said this storm could go on for about 3 years. And he did admit that even though he wants jobs to be protected, there will be, in his words, adjustments to the workforce. What does that mean? Well, in real terms, that means jobs will go in some places, but he wants to keep that to the minimum. And so there's a lot of money here, but in fact, 15 billion also has to take into account that I think 7 billion of that has already been announced, and that was given to Air France. So it's 8 billion to protect the sector in the southwest mainly, as you pointed out. And also what I thought was interesting is that there's a lot of underemployed engineers right now. He doesn't want them to all be put on the job heap. So he wants them to be going to all those aviation schools that there are in Toulouse. And there's hundreds of students coming out of places like the ENAC, Super Aero, really major world-class engineering schools. And he wants these engineers to go there and teach them and help them so that they're ready for what the aviation industry will look like in, say, 3 years' time.
Marc Perret, did you like what you heard this morning from the French government?
Yeah, I heard the declaration of Mr. Le Maire, but I must say that actually we're facing we're facing the unknown there, because we do not really know the effects of the health crisis on the air traffic. The key issue is to know whether traffic will start again, air traffic will start again, will rise again, and then of course the aviation industry will start again, or if ahead of us there's an air traffic drop, which would of course raise the question of reorientation of our production capacities. I just wanted to say, before maybe we go into the details, that we don't, I hear, we've got two musics going on here. We've got one music which says that we are facing a major crisis with thousands of people being unemployed in the near future, and we have to find some answers to that. And there's another music which could raise a bit in the coming weeks or so, which would say that this crisis absolutely linked to one unique question: is air traffic going to start again or not? There's a second music, as I said, which is starting to say that this air traffic is relying at 70% on the internal airlines in the USA and China, which means that if these two markets, which represent 70% of the traffic in the world, if these two markets start again, then of course the future would look a bit greater.
And to answer Penny Dickinson's question, which is at what point will passengers feel safe enough to get on a plane?
This is the question. I mean, I'm not sure it's a question. The question is, there are two questions on this. The first one is to know whether this health crisis will be there again in the coming months and years. In which case, of course, you and I, we wouldn't like to go to Brazil or to any place in the world if we have a risk of getting infected by COVID. First question. Second question on this is there a move in the spirit of the people saying that taking a plane to go on the other side of the planet is a good thing or not? Which is more a philosophical question. So these two questions: will COVID be still there in the next months or years, which will really have an effect on the air traffic? And is there a move in the head of the people which is saying that taking a plane, as I said, to spend 3 days, 4 days, 1 week in Indonesia is not a good thing for the planet. These are two questions. I haven't got the answers, but these are the questions on the table.
Yeah, we've talked on this show in the past about the growing concept of flight shaming. We've seen Greta Thunberg, who refuses to get on a plane because of the pollution issues. Marc Ivaldi, of course, before the coronavirus struck, we didn't see a significant dip, did we, in air travel?
No, not at all. I don't know if the effect of CO2 emission is enough to change the willing to travel. I think that it is very important. I mean, it's something which is inherent to human to move and to
so
visit.
The long-term prospects for Toulouse are good because people are going to want to take the plane no matter what.
Well, it's a little bit we have to go into the details. I mean, of course, as Marc Perez said, it depends really on how long this crisis will keep going. We can right now what we have what we see in the surveys and and the information that we can have is that on the leisure market there is no change. I mean, there is clearly willing to keep traveling, whether planes are polluting or not. On the business market, it's a little bit. There will be a change. I mean, as you can see, we are doing a broadcast by this video technology, and I'm pretty sure that managers are not going to put their collaborators and workers in plane for meeting, if they can avoid that. Because it is less costly, it is very efficient technology. So I'm pretty sure that on the business market there will be a change, which is not a good news for airlines, because the business market, not only I will say the business seat in airplane, but all the people that are traveling for business. There will be probably a reduction. For the leisure market, I don't think that that will change. Of course, what is going to happen in the very short run is that everybody is going to be hurt. I mean, we are seeing the forecast on the effect of the crisis on GDP is going to be at least 11-12%, maybe more, which means less revenue. And if you have less revenue, it means that you are going to spend more on leisure for sure. So there will be an effect, but the willingness to travel remains. So if hopefully the epidemiologists are saying we have reached collective immunity, or we are going to get a drug, a vaccine very soon, I'm pretty sure that the traffic can start again very quickly. The very, very, very big problem that we have is that for the moment, it's a big uncertainty. The only thing that the doctors are saying is just to put a mask and respect social distancing. So that's of course not a good news for the next month, the next few months for many firms, in particular in the Toulouse area, as you said.
So Penny Dickinson, that carbon neutral plane that you heard the economy minister touting earlier, that's still 15 years away. what are the prospects for Toulouse? Like you said at the outset, a city that, well, lives and breathes aeronautics.
Well, from a tourism perspective, just picking up on what Mark Ivaldi was just saying about leisure travelers will still travel, that is being reinforced by what my clients are telling me. So when clients were cancelling tours as soon as we went into confinement, March 12th, clients were saying to me, we're cancelling our trip, but it's a postponement. We will be back to Toulouse. We want to visit Toulouse, but it's just a question of when. So people will come back. In terms of, for the Toulouse industry, in terms of our travellers, and if we look at our hotel occupancy, for example, that is roughly split 2/3 business travel, 1/3 leisure travel. So again, going back to what Mark was just saying about how the leisure travel will come back sooner, that's obviously good for us, but we really need to be attracting more of the leisure travellers to come to and experience our wonderful city.
And Penny, what are the prospects for this summer? We had on the one hand, the Prime Minister encouraging all his compatriots to take their vacation here in France. On the other hand, we know that a lot of British people won't be coming this summer.
Sure. I think a lot, from a British perspective, a lot will depend what happens with the quarantine. And they've said they're going to review that every 3 weeks. So maybe the end of June, that will change. For sure, in the long term, Britain will not lose its love affair with France. And they will
southwestern France.
Southwestern France, exactly. And they will be coming back. I think for this summer, what everyone in the tourism industry is saying is that it's more a local approach. And companies are having to pivot to think how can they adapt their offering to attract local tourists to come and visit our wonderful city. And if you think about Toulouse, we're a real hidden gem. We're not yet fully on the tourist trail. We're a very authentic city. And because of the aerospace industry, we have maybe wrongly a very industrial reputation. And for me, it's always a pleasure when clients come and they experience the city and the history of the city and seeing the wonder and joy, because they literally had no idea what an offering we had in such a beautiful city. So it's about adapting to the local market. I think tour groups, for example, will become more private based. People will want to stay in their own social bubbles and do tours with their family and close friends, for example. But already we're seeing really great initiatives from the local tourism industry of how they are adapting to meet the new protocols, to meet the new hygiene challenges.
The tourists will come back, but will the jobs come back? Let's take a listen to some of those on the factory floor at the Coquille factory that's in the Toulouse suburb of Mondouzil.
On travaille un petit peu pour tout le monde, donc que ce soit Airbus, la TECOR, Safran, tous les grands donneurs d'ordre. Donc du coup, eux, ils ont baissé leur cadence, donc du coup, nous, on est aussi infectés et on a perdu beaucoup de caisses.
On avait connu la crise de 2009, mais qui était beaucoup moins importante que celle-ci. Celle-ci est jamais vue. C'est jamais vu dans une société comme la nôtre.
Yeah, I know it's going to be, Chris Bachman, particularly hard for those who work in sectors such as steelworks, all these small, you mentioned it at the outset, these small companies that are subcontractors for the big aerospace groups. And the question is, will the jobs come back? Is Toulouse too over-dependent on one single sector? A bit like we said at the beginning, Detroit with automobiles.
Yeah, you know what? I think first of all, we've got to step back a bit. I can understand my workers are kind of stunned right now and shocked, because back in January, when I went to the annual press conference with the president of Airbus, they had had record deliveries in 2019. And also this region, along with Bordeaux, was relatively unscathed by the virus itself. We had very few cases overall compared to, say, Eastern France and Paris, and yet we're possibly one of the most affected areas as a result of the virus. And so the question is, what happens to those jobs now? Because they weren't expecting this. And the problem is that a lot of money is going to go to these suppliers, and the big companies like Airbus, Thales, Safran are going to take part in a big kind of bowl and give this money to help them, the suppliers invest, especially the small ones. But these are small companies. They often kind of have little niche markets. They don't want to share with others. They're suspicious of others because they're competitors. They have to think very long term when they've already been told to think about investing heavily in aircraft now, but these aircraft aren't needed now. The bottom line is it's all great to invest in aircraft, but if people aren't going to want these airplanes in the next few years because they have an oversupply right now, it's really difficult to get these small competitors to work together. They're all suspicious of each other. They all want to look after their own turfs. And now they're being told, well, you have to do this. The bottom line is there will be job cuts. We don't know how many because we don't know how long this virus long-term impact will be. We don't know how quickly the industry will pick up. Earlier, we talked about business travel. Business travel is actually the most profitable end of the whole market for the airlines. They make their money from people traveling. If I go up to Paris to see you today, Francois, come back tomorrow on a normal Air France flight during the week, it's about 500 euros. If I go over the weekend, Friday through Monday, it's 110, 115 euros. That gives you an idea of the business market. Now take me going from here to Japan. So we have no idea when this market's going to come back. If you don't have any planes to sell, then basically all these tinkering right now won't have a huge impact in the short term. That's the main worry for those workers. And you really understand.
We heard one of those factory floor workers compare to 2009. Back then, what we saw was a lot of the big banks that were forced to do layoffs took advantage of the crisis to get leaner and to cut jobs in some cases which never came back. You can wonder about it, and I'll put this to Marc Perret. When you look at some of the announcements made by the economy minister this Tuesday, he's talking about a €1.5 billion fund to help small businesses. Great. Next to it, there's a €300 million fund to help automation and robotization of small and medium-sized companies. In other words, the companies are being boosted, but actual jobs and the ones that were there before may no longer exist when those factories are back at 100%.
Yeah, I think what you said and what Chris just said is absolutely important. The thing is, we have to know whether we believe or not in the theory of runoff from primes down to the subcontracting chain. Because of course we've got these main companies, they will receive a lot of money within this plan, but we have to make sure that this money goes down to the subcontracting chain, which is the weakest part of the job. Because on my side, as the mayor of a city, I would not understand and I would not agree with the fact that employees, simple people, those people who have to pay their rent at the end of the month would suffer of the effect of this crisis. We cannot understand if we would have some layoffs in the chain, in the aeronautic industry, because if we provide public money, and we are providing a lot of public money, there has to be a counterpart to, for example, partial unemployment measures.
Because I'm seeing, Marc Perret, I'm seeing a lot of talk about, factories using 3D printer technology, more and more automation. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you want to stay competitive, is that the only way to go if you're one of those small businesses? Do you have to get rid of the jobs?
Well, you have to find a solution for the jobs, but I would not fight against progress and all innovation. That the innovation tools you're talking about is the future. So we have to remain competitive with this evolution of the production chains. I agree with that, but of course if you do that with thousands of people going to being laid off, then there's a problem. Why should we be a major champion in France and in Europe in the aeronautic industry, and at the same time have hundreds or tens of thousands of people going to unemployment? I would not agree with that. This is not. So we have the defense of employment has to be one of the first priorities of this plan, with the preservation of research capacities, and as I said at the beginning of my speech, the support to the subcontracting sector, because the main companies, the primes, they are strong enough to face the crisis. But of course, as you just said in the interview you passed a few minutes ago, the weakest part of the subcontracting chain are these a lot of these companies being in Toulouse areas, the subcontracting sector, and these have to be supported. And I'm not sure, and we have to get some guarantees that this subcontracting sector will be supported and that the money will not only go to the prime contractors.
So Marc Perret, you're vice president for the Greater Toulouse area, the regional, the Metropolitan Council for the Greater area. So I'm going to turn to Marc Ivaldi. What would you say to Marc Perret in terms of do you push for a strategy where the city has to diversify its economy more? Yes or no to more automation? How do you do it so that those jobs remain?
Well, there are a lot of things to say. I fully agree with Marc Perret that in the short term, we have to do everything to keep people on jobs and to avoid that firm are going bad. That's the first point. The second point is, of course, it's important to innovate, and the objective of innovation, clearly, given the new condition of the air traffic market, will be to produce aircraft that will be less expensive. So everything that will be able to have aircraft that are more fuel efficient, able to manage the people in a better condition. It is certainly the way to go.
So Marc Ivaldi, forgive me for insisting. Where will the jobs go?
So. Well, on your question, I mean, the Occitanie and the Toulouse area is not only the aeronautic industry. There are also other industry. I mean, the first one in Occitanie, which is important, is tourism. So, of course, with the COVID, it is not a good news, and probably is going to be very hurt by that. But there is also all the technology on artificial intelligence, which is quite developing in this area. So, of course, I mean, the main part, and around 40-50% of the GDP of the region of Toulouse is coming from the aeronautic, but.
40%. It's a huge number, isn't it? Is it too much?
Yes, I mean, there are forecasts saying that we could have 40,000 people laid off in the next month. So it's terrible. Again, it depends on the length of this crisis. Now for sure, what we have seen. But that was before the COVID crisis. Is that a need to innovate in this industry, and for sure that using robots, as you have mentioned, is probably going to increase in the future, as in many other industries. And of course, that we are probably. A problem of jobs that we are going to lose on that. So the important responsibility of politicians and government is to invest in the education and in the formation of the people.
Let me put that to Penny Dickinson, because. Again, we've seen this movie before. There was a big crisis in 2009 when the economy recovered in Europe and in the West in general. A lot of the jobs that were there before had gone, never came back. How many people around you would you say who are like you, used to work in the aeronautics industry, are capable of reinventing themselves?
Well, I think we have to look at what Toulouse can offer people to reinvent itself. And as Mark was just saying, yes, aerospace is the big percentage of jobs here, but Toulouse is a city of science. 2018, it was the European City of Science. We are ranked third in the country in terms of foreign investment by the agency Business France. In terms of being now an attractive city for foreign investment coming in, and it's emerging technologies. It's things like life sciences, health tech, AI that was mentioned, cancer. There are a lot of exciting scientific developments that are happening in Toulouse. Just recently, Toulouse was selected as France's candidate for the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. Now, that's currently based in the UK, but with Brexit happening, that centre will relocate to the EU. Now, we're up against Vienna, we're up against Madrid, Bologna and Potsdam. But again, there are all exciting opportunities here for Toulouse to grab hold of and to try and build on our scientific roots.
All right, so it's good that there's prospects ahead, because when you look at the last couple of years, it's been difficult at times. You've had first off the yellow vest movement, which in some instances got violent in the center of the city, and then we had our local correspondent last December reporting on pension reform strikes that ground the city, like the rest of the country, to a halt.
If you wanted to fly anywhere, pretty much can't in France. If you wanted to take a train, you definitely can't either. There was one train. Oh, one plane's just arriving now. It's a Ryanair flight.
Chris Bachman, when you think back to the last couple of years, coronavirus has come on top of what you could say was already a double whammy.
Good for the economy down here. They were very bad for the economy. We talked about those pension problems. That was also not good. But I would say that, and I've been here a while now, like Penny, and there was a huge restructuring plan at Airbus called Power 8. They give them these strange names. And then it was called Power 8 Plus, because the first one wasn't big enough. And that was a major restructuring back then when there was problems with that super jumbo, the A380, how it cost so much more than originally planned, and it was late. And so they had to look for ways of cost cutting. And then the industry bounced back. And it bounced back in a big way. Then, of course, there was 9/11, which caused trouble. And, of course, there was the 2008. So it's gone through many cycles and it's bounced back. I don't think anybody thinks that Airbus is going to crumble. The suppliers aren't going to crumble. It's more a question is, how long will this take? And basically, everyone was taken by surprise by this because nobody expected this 3 months ago. That's the big difference. This was an industry that was riding high, along with, say, the luxury industry in France. These were the two that were, and of course, tourism, that was really putting the economy forward. And suddenly to have one of these legs, two legs if you include tourism, suddenly taken away, that's the big surprise. And the question still is, when will the industry recover? People assume it will recover, but nobody likes uncertainty, especially in the aviation industry. And that's what they really want to have some answers to. And at the moment, we just simply don't have those answers. Nobody has those answers.
Marc Perret, when we had the Yellow Vest movement, there was a lot of talk about who are the winners and who are the losers of globalization. We've been talking about in this discussion how Toulouse, high-tech, university town, where Marchivaldi teaches, they have Nobel economics laureates. You're well-connected with trains and everything. But you did have that strong Yellow Vests movement and this idea of winners and losers of globalization. How is that balance going to change where you are after this pandemic?
Well, the question is, it's to know whether we have 30,000 people being unemployed in addition to what we have already. Of course, it could be a disaster. We know that this information about the unemployment plans could come in somewhere in September, October. So it is sure that we have ahead of us a period which could start in September, October, which could be very difficult because in addition to the Gilets jaunes movement, you could have this a huge increase of unemployment in the area. But to answer your question about getting a modernization of the production chains, we don't have to think only in the fact that if we have some robots coming on, we have to lay off people. We could change the general conditions of the working class in this area. Like, for example, the working week of 4 days, 32 hours instead of 35. Why not? I mean, the answers that have to come in the social field with towards the innovation, which is coming into the production chains. We have to innovate not only in the technology field, but also in the social field, and create and invent some new working conditions together with this modernization of the chains.
Marc Yvetti, the leaders in Paris, are they capable of doing what Marc Perret says? That is to say, think a bit outside of the box and come up with creative solutions to keep the jobs?
Well,
yes.
I'm not sure. Well, the thing is, unfortunately, the problem of dualism in the labor market is going to be still a problem that we have to face for the future, because it's not linked to the COVID. The COVID was an unexpected event, but the real problem is that is the technology revolution that we are facing, and of course the problem of having people that are less and less adapted to the new technology. So of course, I think that for this market, that the people that are not in the system, we have to make a lot of imagination to create a job, and to that's and I think that I agree with Marc on that. Now, where we are maybe not totally agree is that I think that I will say that globalization is still going; it will not stop. And I think that one important aspect for Toulouse is precisely to go further in this direction. That is to say, not to avoid the internationalization of market. Toulouse need to be more open to the world.
Needs to embrace it, is what you're saying.
It is unbelievable to have to be the only city outside Paris having the headquarters of the world champion, and not being able to attract more of the international market. And I think that, and that concerns all the market. It concerns agriculture. It concerns the food industry. It concerns the tourism. That is where we can get a lot of jobs. So,
right, so speaking of being creative, one of the emblematic products of Toulouse, you might call it, is its rugby team. Chris Bachmann, I know that they are asked players to take a pay cut because the suspension of matches has hit them hard. And they've also launched what they're calling a wall of solidarity, where fans can sponsor a brick inside one of the walls at the stadium. There is, again, this feeling, can the city, what's it been like in a city without rugby the last 3 months?
You're well informed, Francois. Francois and I have actually been to rugby games together, so we both know a little bit about this. I was at Stade Toulouse last week. I saw the president. He says that if rugby, basically, there hasn't been a rugby game for, since March, and it won't be until September at the earliest. This is the longest period that France has known without a rugby game of any sort since the Second World War. And right now, if the rugby does resume in September, how do you have a combat sport with a pandemic? It doesn't make sense. You're looking at maybe the wealthiest rugby league in the world, which is France, having 7 to 14 of its clubs going bankrupt. And that's what the president himself saying. That's not me saying it. But basically, Toulouse Rugby Club was waiting for a quarterfinals in the European Cup, was supposed to happen, I guess, this month now. It's not going to happen anytime soon. That was thousands of fans coming over from Ireland. It was it would have been a sold-out team. Rugby is part of the fabric. It's part of the morale. The team is actually French champions. And the fact that this pandemic has added, I guess you can say, the morosity in this region. Obviously, we talked about aviation, but tourism, of course, and the rugby is extremely important down here. It's probably the one region of mainland Europe where rugby is more important than football. So not having the rugby, it kind of affects morale here. You talk to people about it, it's an important part of life here. It would be the same thing in Liverpool for football. And nobody knows when rugby will resume. And it's very important for the local economy. And it's very important basically for the morale of people who are fans of rugby, who are down here. And I know that Mark is amongst those who is a fan of rugby.
Yeah, there's a big nostalgia for the days when you didn't have social distancing. I noticed at Penny Dickinson on VE Day when you posted on Instagram a picture of the Place du Capitole, the big main square in Toulouse, awash with people who were celebrating the Allied victory then. Gosh, you don't need to go back to 1944 or 45, right? You can just go back to January and be nostalgic.
Exactly. And that square, Place du Capitole, it's the heartbeat, it's the pulse of our city, and it's made for gathering people together to celebrate what is happening in the city. We've just been talking about rugby, whenever Stade Toulousain goes out to greet its fans, the square is awash with red and black. It was very strange in confinement just to see it a little bit like a ghost town, but now we've had the restaurants, the cafes are back opening. People are starting to come out of confinement, starting to refine their way in life. Some of the school pupils are back now. So little by little, the really enablers of getting the economy going are starting to get put in place.
All right, Toulouse will rise again, says Penny Dickinson. I want to
and
thank
our
you so
spirit
much.
will.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank as well Marc Perret, Marc Ivaldi, Chris Bachman, our correspondent. We want to thank you, of course, for joining us in ever greater numbers on Facebook, on Twitter, and on our YouTube channel. There's more on France24.com.